nature of the footprints, namely their remarkable consistency, their biomechanical appropriateness.
Spanning the entire globe, involving hundreds of different cultures, explaining the same phenomenon by different names. At some point, you have to go, even as a scientist, you have to say, well, there's got to be something. It can't all be mass illusion.
Welcome to Out of the Woods with the Bigfoot Influencers. My name is Tim Halloran, and I'm thrilled that you're joining us today. In this episode, we are going to be chatting with Jeremiah Byron, and he is the host of the Bigfoot Society Podcast. We have an amazing and fun conversation. He and I have been friends for a little while now, and I just can't wait to get to that. But before we do, I want to invite you over to check out our website. You can come see us at thebigfootinfluencers.com. Drop us a note, check out the content, see where you can buy the book, the Bigfoot Influencers book. And then if you want to find us on Facebook, you can find us at the Bigfoot Influencers. Instagram is the Bigfoot Influencers. Twitter is BF Influencers. And then go over to the Untold Radio Network on YouTube and any podcast platform, and you can check out our weekly episode we do there as well. But enough about that. Let's get to Jeremiah, and I hope you enjoy this. Jeremiah, welcome to Out of the Woods with Bigfoot Influencers, and welcome to the studio.
Tim, how's it going? Oh man, I'm excited to be on here with you. It's been a while since I've gotten to talk to you. Last time was at Crypticon. We got to hang out that Sunday night, and that was a fun time. It's good to talk to you again, man.
It was a great time, yeah, and I appreciate this. I'm really thrilled. And hey, what we wanted to do tonight is we wanted to introduce the audience to your show and what you do. And I'm just going to ask you some, we're going to have a conversation, ask you some questions. We'll go back and forth, and we'll have some fun.
Absolutely.
So let's start with this, Jeremiah. What's the name of your show, and who are you?
All right. So my name is Jeremiah Byron. I am the host of the podcast Bigfoot Society. Tim, Bigfoot Society has kind of gone through a evolution over the years. It started in early 2019 as a cryptozoology focused interview podcast primarily. And then just over the last half a year, it's kind of made a natural progression where it just kept being more and more and more Bigfoot focused. And I really find myself doing, it's pretty much a 100% Bigfoot focused podcast. I have, I would say 2/3 currently I'm talking to people that have had actual Bigfoot encounters, interviewing witnesses about their encounters. And the other third of episodes, I would say, talking to researchers, authors that are in the Bigfoot community, people like that. And every once in a while, I'll have a non-Bigfoot related episode. I usually put that up in the Patreon for the diehards, and put that up there. But I would say you could say Bigfoot Society is a primarily Bigfoot related interview podcast, and I've done it for a few years, and I have a lot of fun doing it. It keeps me going, man. And I mean, you get it. You do this too. It gives you the juice to keep going. So.
Yeah, and I love your show. So
thanks, man.
It's as we get through this, we'll encourage the audience and let them know how to find you. So what inspired you to create it originally?
Yeah. So, well, it's all, man. It's how far do you want to go back, right? But I will say, so what inspired me to do it? So back in 2019, I was involved with my buddy Andrew was involved shooting some interviews for the Terror in the Skies documentary that was put out by STM, Small Town Monsters. And that happened the weekend of the Van Meter Visitor Festival that happened in Van Meter, Iowa. And so my buddy Andrew and I, we had worked together at Apple. So we did our thing there, and we got into cryptid stuff along the way. And he was like, hey, you should come out with me, see the interviews take place. It'll be a fun time. I was like, oh, this would be great. I love STM stuff. I'll just like be in the corner eating popcorn while like history is made. This is amazing. At the last minute, Andrew was like, dude, I need you actually to be the guy who is off camera asking these people like Chad Lewis and Steve Ward and those guys what the questions are to get them to tell the story that I can have on camera. You won't be on camera, but you're kind of leading the way, right? And I was like, oh, this sounds crazy because I'm kind of a guy who doesn't like to do that. He's like, dude, it'll be cool. So halfway through it, though, it was like this thing. I could feel it. It snapped in my head. And I was like, oh, my goodness, I absolutely love this. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, man, I had such a high. It was awesome. I was like, it's undescribable, but if you love doing something, you get it. That's what I'm trying to say. I loved interviewing people. And I was like, man, I love listening to podcasts, but like maybe I could start my own. So like literally, so then I started using the Anchor app, if you remember that. And it was like me talking into my phone, the microphone, like the first 5 episodes. Some listeners really like them. I think they're I mean, it's like me sitting in my car, like talking to myself, like, hey, Bigfoot is cool, blah, blah, blah. And then like eventually like Seth Breedlove was like, yeah, I'll come on your show because you helped me out with Terror in the Skies. And like, he was my first big interview. And then it's just like kind of dominoed from there. Like I would have just random people on, but then I'd have like Cliff Barrickman on, and then I'd have like Dr. Mildrum on. But yeah, it's the weirdest thing. And then like, you know, you keep at something after a few years, it just like it turns into something. You keep at it, and you love it. And I mean, the cool thing now, I love talking to people that have had encounters. That is awesome. I love it. And the cool thing is people listen to the podcast and then they email me afterwards and they're like, someone has experienced the same thing I did, and now I feel like I can share it with someone. Like I'm just like, you know, trying to help people as well at the same time. So
that's what keeps you going.
Tim, it is. It is because at the end of the day, I like to help make people's lives better. And in a way, I feel like if only providing entertainment, I don't know if you've ever experienced, but there have been people that have sent me emails and they're like, dude, I have to let you know that the stuff that you put out every week, it helped me get through this area of life, and it was the only thing. And that to me made everything worth it to know that I was able to help someone out in that way. So
man, yeah,
it's important.
Super cool. Yeah. It's even if you help one person, it makes it all worth it. That's really cool. Yeah. And going back to what you mentioned about Anchor, and you know, the cool thing about what we're doing now, it's you still have to invest a little bit of money, but you can get started up on these podcasts or YouTube or whatever you're doing for relatively inexpensive. You put a few bucks in here and there, you add as you go, and you know, you can make it happen. I'm not my equipment's not professional by any means, but we make do, you know, so it's really cool. So I want to ask you, so kind of piggybacking off what you mentioned in the opening, if I'm new to your show, you know, what, you know, if I said, hey, Jeremiah, I want to listen to your show, what can I expect? How would you respond to that question?
That's a really good question. I would say for listeners coming in right now, I would say you're going to hear a lot of me talking to people that have never shared their Bigfoot encounter. That's the thing I find really important. And Tim, it is a lot of work to find people that have never shared their stuff before. But I feel like that's really important. So you're gonna hear a lot of me talking to witnesses that have never shared their stories, and because of that, like some of these interviews, they get a little emotional, which is I think is awesome. You're also going to, you know, I try to have some really fun interviews with talking to Bigfoot researchers about their research and stuff that, you know, you might not hear on other podcasts. Try to make it a thing where just make it a unique experience for listeners. And I will tell you, if you're new to the podcast, if you listen to it now and you go back in the back catalog, Bigfoot Society was different, but it has changed into what it is currently now, which is talking to people that have seen Bigfoot and Bigfoot researchers. So
That's super cool. And I will say for the audience who's listening or watching, Jeremiah has a really cool way of having a calming conversation, you know, because I've listened to some of these your interviews with first timers who are sharing their story, and you make them feel comforted, and I think that makes a huge difference. They feel like they're in a safe place. So that's that's super cool. So yeah, I just want to share that with the audience too. Make sure you check that out. So I want to go back to you a little bit. How did you get involved in cryptozoology and Bigfoot and such? When did that start?
Totally. So the first interactions would be back when I was pretty young. I would say anywhere around like maybe 9 to 10. My dad would watch a lot of he'd watch a lot of like old In Search Of and like what else? Like Unsolved Mysteries. I used to be freaked out by Robert Stack, and oh my goodness, like he would be like, "This is so cool, you watch it," and I'd be like, "Oh, Dad," and like, you know, looking through my hands.
Right.
Like some of those episodes are crazy for a little kid.
They're intense,
there was that, and then so that planted the seed, right? And then during high school, I was like, totally forgot about it. And I lived out in New England, prime country for like weird stuff. Didn't care a bit about it. Then when I moved out to Iowa, started working at Apple, found my weird family, right? The guys I worked with at Apple, super weird dudes, awesome dudes, Matt and Andrew, and just started like we're like, oh, you ever talked about Bigfoot? We're talking about Bigfoot. We're talking about other cryptids. And we're like, oh, there's cryptids like in Iowa. There's cryptid like 20 minutes away that has its own festival. This is amazing. And then after that, that led right into the story I told before. So it's kind of a weird story, a weird trail to get there. But, you know, if you're a parent, be careful what you watch with your kids because it's going to affect the rest of their lives.
Right. Thanks, Dad. Right.
Yeah, right. But I'm glad he did. Yeah. Good stuff.
So, what's the most interesting thing that you've learned since you started, recording or since you started the podcast?
Okay.
Could be about yourself. It could be about, somebody
I really like, I'm going to shout out, I'm thinking of what's something interesting I've learned over the years. It's not really through my own podcast, but I will shout out the Wide Open Research podcast with Dr. Russ Jones on your network. I remember he was interviewing Daryl Collier, I believe, a few ago, and on the Untold Radio Network, and he was just like,
"You're welcome, Russ, for introducing me to Daryl." By the
Russ,
way,
hope my check is in the mail.
Yeah,
but he like drops this fact where it's like, oh, so usually Bigfoot are seen when there's at least 40 inches of rain annually per year in the area. And for some reason, that just like totally blew my mind, right? So that's like probably the coolest factoid that I've learned in a long time about Bigfoot related issues. It sent me down a rabbit trail, and then I looked into like the NAWAC environmental essay, and then made a ChatGPT-4 algorithm about how to find Bigfoot based on all this stuff. Like I go rabbit hole crazy on stuff, you know that. But
you're obsessive.
Like I am very obsessive. You know. About myself, it's been interesting to learn like a lot of audio editing. That's been cool. It's just probably the most invaluable thing is through doing, sometimes multiple interviews a week. Right now, 2 interviews a week. It's just how to talk to people more and how to align with them and to put you in their shoes and just like really, so Tim, what I at the beginning, I used to write every question out and I would be in these handcuffs where it's like, okay, stick to the questions. And then one day I was like, man, your interviews are not good because you're sticking to the questions. You need to do the research about the person, and then you need to focus in on them and live in that moment and be curious. And if something comes up in your head, have the courage to ask it in the right moment. And because of that, that's where some of my best interviews, I think, have come from. So just not being afraid to step out, to have the courage to ask the questions that you're really curious about and to align with the people that you're talking to. And I think that's probably the most invaluable thing I've learned over the years doing the podcast.
Super cool and great advice too.
Thank you.
So can you share maybe a moving or a interesting or fascinating, interview that you've conducted that like sticks out?
Yeah.
You've had a lot of good people on yours, and not even famous
There's a
people.
lot.
Just a lot of your witnesses are amazing.
There's a lot, man. I'm thinking of one that sticks in my mind because the gentleman was so emotional about it. And you could tell like he was back in his mind. He was back where he was in northern Michigan in a town called Glenny, Michigan. And he was a retired police officer. He went up to this family cabin and it was his one area where he could be away from the stress. He could be safe. And then he's going out to use the facilities, an old outhouse. And literally this like Bigfoot steps out of nowhere and it's just a stare down. And like, it's the craziest encounter, but like there were so many parts of that interview where like he was like, I can't do this. It's too much. And I had to like talk him back into the interview.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up doing a great job, but like there's a little bit of that interview people didn't hear because I really tried to take a few hours to make everything flow succinctly, right? But I would say that was the most I've ever been like really emotionally into an interview to the point where after I was done, I couldn't sleep for 4 hours. And I was just like, I've got to chill out because I am so emotionally invested in what this guy experienced. And oh man, that's probably the favorite one I've done so far, but they have all been really, really fun.
Yeah, that was a good one. I remember he was from Arizona, right? I believe.
That's right. Yeah. Arizona would go up to Glenny, Michigan. And if you look up the county Glenny's in, there's actually multiple BFR reports on the public website. So it's just wild stuff, man.
Yeah, we had that interesting. We were, Dana and I, we were chatting with Shane Carpenter the other day, and he was telling a story and I got chills, and that had never happened to me before. I'm like, that's pretty, when that happens, that's just interesting when you get into that moment with them.
It's awesome.
So that's pretty cool. So that's awesome. So what advice would you have for people who want to get started in this, whether it's a podcast or YouTube, because obviously you do both. So
So that's really good. Do not spend all your money right off the bat. You do not need to spend all your money right off the bat. You can spend a relatively cheap USB microphone and focus on getting 8 episodes recorded. Also focus on a subject where you could just be talking about it to yourself and no one ever listens to your podcast for years, and you wouldn't care, and you would never stop talking about it. That's what you need to talk about. You are not working against other people. You're working with people. You need to focus on finding your community, or also helping build a community and influencing it in the way that you want, positively. Don't get all swept up into negative parts of the community. It's very easy when you're first starting out. Also, listen. Let's say you record an episode, listen to it before you take before you release it, right? Take a few hours, do some, if you've got a Mac, use GarageBand. I'm sure, I think Audacity is the free one for PC. Take the time to learn through tutorials on YouTube that are free how to edit and make your audio sound better. You will lose. I saw a poll once where 50% of people said that if the audio is terrible on a podcast episode, they're gone within minutes, maybe even less. Don't take a lot of time just chatting. This is personal. I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, yeah. But personally, what I found is don't do a super long intro. Do a little intro, get right into the action. That's what the people want to hear. Just get right into it. My good friend Tate Hieronymus taught me this one way back in the day. I used to be like, Tate, I could never get this person on the podcast. Have you asked him? No. Well, dude, and it's pretty much the Michael Scott Wayne Gretzky thing. Like, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, or something like that.
Yep.
So he taught me a big lesson there, and because of that, I reached out to some people that was like, yeah, Cliff would never come on, my little deal, and actually happened. So don't be afraid to have the confidence to go after, make your bucket list at the beginning. Write down 10 people you're like, I could never talk to this person, and then look at it in a few years, and you'll be surprised who you've talked to. Those are the main bits of advice that come to mind.
Cool. And I'll add one thing to that. I mean, we're like a family here once you get started in this. Absolutely. And I'll lean on somebody, say, hey, can you connect me with this person? And they do the same thing for me too, or I do the same thing for them too. So it's there's plenty of podcasts. I learn and I listen to as many as I can, and we just want to, hey, we're having fun, we're enjoying this, we're passionate about it, and if I can help someone out, I'm going to do it. It's pay it forward, so that's and you've done the same. You've done it for me, already. So it's been super cool. These guys, a guy like Jeremiah, I'm just telling the audience, if I need advice or something, he's like, yeah, dude, let's talk tonight, and that's how cool Jeremiah is, and him and so many other people in this, and it's just fun doing that.
For sure, man.
So tell the audience, how we can find your show.
Totally. So you can search for Bigfoot Society on all major podcast platforms, like your Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, all that good stuff. You can also go to www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. You can get links to all the different places that the episodes are on, the YouTube channel, the Patreon, all sorts of good stuff there. It's kind of our main hub is the website, bigfootsocietypodcast.com. So, here's one more. Can I do one more piece of advice? Because this is going to save someone a lot of money in their future. If you can get your podcast name as a URL, you need to get it. Absolutely. Because when you check it, it could be $4,000. I'm not going to say who that has happened to, this guy. But if you can buy it right off the bat for $11.99, do it. Absolutely do it, because someone will snipe it when you get bigger, and That's all I'm saying. So
I was so fortunate when I created the title of the book and obviously the podcast. I, that was part of it before I finalized it. I Google searched the Bigfoot influencers.
Yep.
And guess what? It was nobody ever thought of it. If you Google search the Bigfoot influencers right now, it comes up. Something about me or Doug or us, we all come up. So I'm so blessed. It was just fortunate. It was just one of those weird names that no one ever had thought about. And I was able to swipe up the .com, the .net. I think I only got 2 of them. And I'd probably never use the .net, but I have it.
You could just redirect it to the .com in case someone types in the .net by accident. Something like that.
So you mentioned Patreon. So for the audience who don't know what Patreon is, and can you share what it is, and then tell a little about your Patreon and what they get?
Totally. So this will be kind of half advice. So Patreon is a way that you can have a community that you can have stuff like a Discord where you can people can pay a certain amount per month. So for Bigfoot Society, I think it's like $7. You have access to Discord, but also you have access to, I do extra episodes per month. One of which is, so like besides Bigfoot Society, I've also gotten to the point where people send me stories about Iowa weird stuff. And so I started to research them, and then I share about that. I don't share about that really in the public, but I do share about it in the Patreon. So that's kind of an extra thing. But I do have early release episodes ad-free because Bigfoot Society is ad revenue supported as well. And if you don't like hearing the ads, you can hear the uncut, sometimes totally uncut raw audio for what that's worth. And there's been some stuff, the uncut version of Henry Franzoni. Whew, oh boy.
I can
15
imagine.
Extra minutes, buddy.
I would love it. I was chatting back and forth on Messenger yesterday with Henry, and because we're going to have him on upcoming as well. Yes. On one of our, Dana and I will have him on our main show. And he's a hoot. But he's fascinating. He's the best. Such a history in the subject, and he's so, I'm a big on the history of the subject and of the subject of Bigfoot, and Henry, for newcomers, they may have never heard of him. I mean, the first time I heard him, I said, "Who's this Henry Franzoni guy?" And then, but he's been, he's got some cool history. He's like that second generation of people, him and Rick Knoll. And folks like that were hanging out with the early researchers, but they were but they weren't that first round of those, the Four Horsemen and such. So
not many of them left. Not many left now, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, so that's a lot of fun. So Jeremiah, this has been amazing.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. I hope the audience jumps in and follows your show, takes a list, gives it a listen, watch it on YouTube, we're going to share all the links, in this, plus just listen to Jeremiah, explain how to find them. And any parting words for the audience before I let you go?
Tim, thanks so much for having me on. I love that you're doing this sideshow where you're going to, be doing more additional content. I love watching the live shows that you do on YouTube for Bigfoot influencers. It's awesome. But just thank you to everyone who listens to Bigfoot Society. I appreciate it. It makes a difference. And if you've never listened to Bigfoot Society, check one out. I would recommend the Klawock, Alaska, aggressive Alaska Sasquatch episode. Any of the more recent ones are really good ones to start with. But thanks so much for having me on, Tim.
Very cool. You're welcome, Jeremiah, and we'll chat real soon. Well, there you have it, guys. That was great. Jeremiah's become a good friend. He has an excellent show, a wealth of knowledge, great interviewer. So I suggest you guys check him out. We thank you for tuning into our podcast as well on our YouTube. Again, you can find us on www.thebigfootinfluencers.com. Got links to all of our shows. We have our weekly podcast over on the Untold Radio Network. You can find that on YouTube and on all the audio platforms that you get your podcast from. And we appreciate each and every one of you. And we will see you next time.